The Gathering Storm. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was unlike anything a human I could have imagined before first contact. The ceiling arched into darkness, so deep it seemed to touch the edge of the universe. Suspended constellations shimmered above, not as stars, but living, reactive light, an ancient tradition meant to symbolize unity across the stars. Yet tonight, the glow was dim. Tension stole the brilliance. Delegates from over 100 civilizations filled the amphitheater. Their forms varied: feathers, fur, scales, silicon, song. Each species sat in quiet clusters, murmuring to each other in native tones filtered through delicate translation waves. There was no open hostility, just something colder. Doubt. Whispers drifted like smoke. They're too primitive, too emotional, too volatile. They're scared of their own shadows. And beneath it all, they don't belong here. At the outer edge of the chamber, a lone figure stood, still as stone. Ambassador David Wren, humanity's representative. He was tall by galactic standards, his silhouette sharp against the soft, bioluminescent glow of the walls. A diplomat by title, but something older stirred in him tonight, something harder to name. David's hands were folded behind his back, but his knuckles were white. He had heard the whispers, had felt them. The condescension didn't hide well in alien expressions, even when masked by protocol. He stared at the raised dais where the council chair sat, a being of living crystal named VsAliens. Their face, if it could be called that, shimmered in subtle pulses, unreadable. The chair's voice cut through the murmurs like a tuning fork across glass. Let this session commence. A soft chime followed. Translations aligned. Silence fell. This assembly, VsAliens continued, gathers undershadowed concern. Humanity, new among us, has brought questions, not of technology, not of law, but of nature. Dozens of glowing eyes, lenses, stalks, and sonar lobes turned toward David. There is unease, the chair said carefully, among many here, about the human disposition. You fear war. Your species is reactive, prone to chaos. Some wonder whether this fear defines you, whether it disqualifies you. David didn't flinch, but inside something twisted. One of the counselors, a thin, skeletal creature from the Valari clade, spoke next, voice like rustling paper. Our models show high emotional volatility. Your media glorifies violence. Your history is a parade of self-inflicted wounds. What assurance can you offer this council that humanity will not fracture the delicate threads we've woven for eons? More voices followed, some curious, some accusing, none kind. David remained quiet, waiting. Finally, the chair's gaze, if such a thing existed, settled on him. Ambassador Wren, humanity has the floor. A soft spotlight bloomed at his feet. David stepped forward slowly, each footfall echoing louder than it should have. The air felt thinner at the center. Or maybe it was just his pulse in his ears. He looked around the chamber. Alien faces, alien minds. But the same question behind every eye. Were humans really made of? He took a breath. His voice, when it came, was calm, even, measured. We know what you think of us. No translation latency. No confusion. The words were simple, but they landed like stones in still water. You see our fear. You see our scars. You see our chaos. He paused. A few murmurs flickered and died. What you don't see is the fire. Silence. David's gaze swept across the chamber. Every word now carried weight. We fear, yes, but fear doesn't stop us. It fuels us. Every species here has its legacy. Ours is not forged in perfect logic or serene evolution. Ours is forged in survival, in defiance. His voice tightened, controlled but coiled. We've crossed oceans without maps. We've stood against extinction with nothing but hope and stubbornness. We look into the dark and keep walking, because we're not afraid to be afraid. A low, startled pulse hummed through the hall, an involuntary reaction from a symbiotic Oralith contingent. A cultural sign of shock. David registered it but didn't stop. You question whether we belong here. I don't blame you, but understand this. Our fear does not make us weak. It makes us resilient. It makes us dangerous. And it makes us ready. He stepped back. Not finished, but done for now. Around him, the council chamber buzzed with renewed tension. The chairs said nothing. Neither did the other delegates. And yet something had changed. The fire had been lit. Masks and mirrors. The silence that followed David's words was not empty. It was loaded, a held breath across 100 species. But silence can be fickle. In the Galactic Council, it rarely meant agreement. A soft hum crackled through the chamber, subtle, polite, and cold. One of the elder delegates, a being composed of pale biometal strands, spoke with clinical detachment. Spoke in passionately, Ambassador. But emotion is not evidence. We ask not for poetic defiance. We ask for assurance. Others nodded, tentacles rippling, wings folding, antennae clicking. One delegate, a sentient mist from the lean collective, chimed in like wind over broken glass. You say fear fuels you. But fear, it clouds judgment. It is the root of destruction in many species. In your own history, you burn cities because you fear neighbors. David didn't flinch. He'd heard this argument before, at conferences, in broadcasts, across polished tables under sterile lights. But here, in this vast arena of alien intellects, it landed harder. They weren't wrong. They were just incomplete. He opened his mouth to respond, but paused. He looked up, not at the delegates, but at the starlit ceiling, at the illusion of calm order. For a moment, he wasn't in the chamber anymore. He was in Beirut, 2043. Dust in the air, sirens wailing. Buildings cracked open like books. A little girl, barefoot and shaking, stood in the rubble, and a stranger pulled her close, shielded her with his own body as more shells fell. He was in New Orleans, waist-deep in floodwater, where a firefighter passed a newborn into a stranger's arms, whispering, "Get her out. I'll come back for the others." He was in a hospital in Wuhan, watching exhausted nurses cry quietly in stairwells, then wipe their tears and walk back into chaos. He had seen fear, felt it, and watched it bend but not break people. Again and again, the voices in the chamber blurred. Another alien spoke. Your species is inconsistent. You show kindness, but often in reaction to catastrophe. You build peace, but only after great suffering. Your record is erratic. That stung more than the insults. Because it was true. Because it was earned. David looked back down slowly. His voice, when it came, was quieter now, but sharper, more intimate. You think we only show courage after things go wrong. You're right. We do. The council waited, curious. Because we have to. He stepped forward, each word slicing through the heavy air. We're not born into serenity. We don't evolve in perfect harmony. We face failure, constantly, and we rise anyway. That's not inconsistency. That's endurance. An elder from the Rishivan dynasty, a culture of strategic perfection, tilted its horned head. But why glorify struggle? Why not design a society without it? David almost smiled bitterly. Because we're not there yet, and maybe we never will be. But we don't wait for a perfect world before doing good in a broken one. He let that sit. Maybe that's what you don't understand. You've evolved past war, past scarcity. You don't fear hunger or death like we still do. But it's in the fear that we find meaning. It forces us to choose, to fight, to protect, to change. A flicker of movement to his left. The Cryan ambassador, an insectoid race renowned for rigid logic, leaned forward, its voice dry and curious. Then are you saying your fear is a feature, not a flaw? David nodded once. I'm saying fear is part of us, but it doesn't own us. He paused, then added, you call us emotional. Good, we are. But emotion is not chaos. Compassion is not weakness. Grief is not disorder. Rage, when focused, becomes justice. And fear, when acknowledged, becomes courage. Now, there was no polite humming, no soft interruptions, only stillness. In a gallery above, some junior aides watched with wide eyes. A few delegates glanced at one another, expressions unreadable, but changed. Something had begun to shift. The chair didn't speak yet. Neither did the others. But beneath the silence, a new current ran. Not acceptance. Not yet. but curiosity. David exhaled slowly, heart pounding. He hadn't meant to say so much, hadn't planned any of it, but he needed them to see, not the speeches, not the strategy, the truth. The spark ignites. David stood at the center of the chamber, jaw tight, hands still clasped behind his back. But inside, something was coming unbound. He had kept his voice steady, his tone diplomatic. He had offered reason, vulnerability, truth. And yet the council still sat, measured, detached, unshaken. Not hostile, just distant. It was worse than anger. A delegate from the Velthaic Confederacy, a being of telepathic fluid, rippled with polite skepticism. Ambassador, we acknowledge your people's endurance. But emotional resilience is not the same as cultural stability. Your systems fracture. Your alliances crumble. You reinvent yourselves with alarming frequency. Another joined in, a shrike-like being from the Tevel species, known for their rigid hierarchy and disdain for unpredictability. Your wars have killed billions. Entire ecosystems lost. And yet you speak of courage. Do you not see the contradiction? David's chest rose. Slowly, deeply. He had been trained to remain calm in the face of criticism, to respond, not react. But there came a moment, not born of anger, but of truth, when silence became complicity. He stepped forward deliberately. You think you understand courage? The room stilled. The words were not loud, but they pierced. You've mistaken the quiet of your star cities and endless archives for wisdom. You believe that because we still struggle, we're broken, that our scars make us unstable. He turned, sweeping his gaze across the chamber. But we've earned every scar, and we don't run from them. His voice began to rise, not shouting, but ringing like a bell in a temple, sharp and clear. You think peace is the absence of pain. It's not. It's what you choose to build in spite of it. And humanity, flawed, stubborn, afraid, builds anyway. Again and again. He could feel it now. Heat rising in his chest, not rage, but conviction, raw and unstoppable. You say our history is violent? It is, but so is yours. You simply had the privilege of forgetting. We remember everything. Every genocide, every revolution, every protester standing alone in front of tanks. Every mother holding her child in a war zone, whispering, "You'll live. I promise," even if she doesn't believe it. A ripple moved through the crowd. Emotional projection flickered from several empaths. Some drew back, overwhelmed by the intensity of what they were sensing. David didn't stop. You call us unpredictable, but we are also the species that sent food to our enemies, that chose mercy after victory, that kept exploring space not because it was easy, but because it was impossible. Now his voice thundered. You think fear defines us. It doesn't. Courage does. Courage is standing when you want to run. Courage is building when everything falls apart. Courage is reaching out to a galaxy that looks at you with suspicion and still saying, "We are here, and we will not be silent." A hush fell, deeper than before. Even the atmospheric lights of the council dimmed, as if absorbing the force of his words. David stepped back, breath shuddering. The air was thick with something new. Not tension, not disapproval. Awakening. Across the chamber, something shifted. The crying ambassador, stoic and cold by nature, slowly lowered its arms, eyes locked on David, unblinking. The symbiotic oroliths, always neutral, hummed low in a tone used only during rites of reverence. Even a misty-lean delegate trembled slightly, swirling with new colors. David saw it, felt it. The wall had cracked. He spoke again, softer now. You judge us by our worst moments. But we don't hide them. We learn from them. Because we have to. Because the moment we stop, we lose who we are. He turned once more to the chair. I didn't come here to beg for trust. I came here to remind you what it means to fight forward. Not with weapons, but with will, with fire, silence. Then, the unexpected. The ancient being from the Amari Accord, who had said nothing since the session began, finally raised a voice like rolling sand. In our legends, it said slowly, there is a story of a species born in storm. We thought it was myth. David looked up. Perhaps not. The statement hung in the air like the first drop of rain before a downpour. Around the chamber, delegates glanced at one another, not in dismissal, but in wonder. Something had shifted, not just in policy, not in politics. In perception, David had not won them over, but he had woken them. Bridges and embers. For the first time since David Wren had entered the Grand Hall, the chamber didn't feel cold. It wasn't warm either, at least not in temperature. But something had softened, shifted. He could feel it in the silence. It was no longer the silence of judgment. Now, it was the silence before a decision. The council chair, VsAliens, rose slowly. Their crystalline body refracted the ambient starlight again, but this time with a softer hue. A subtle signal, a gesture of acknowledgement, even if not yet approval. "We have heard your voice, Ambassador Wren," the chair said, and in it, we heard not only defiance, but something older, something familiar. David didn't respond. Not yet. He wasn't sure what to say. Not when the floor didn't feel like fire anymore, but like a bridge. A delegate from the Malari Ascendancy, a species that lived half in neural consciousness and half in symbiotic physical form, projected a question directly into the chamber air. If fear drives your resilience, what will you become when fear is gone? David blinked. That one caught him off guard. He hesitated, then took a step forward. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe that's the point. We're still writing our story. Every generation starts with new fears, new hopes. But we're learning. We've stopped pretending we're alone. That's already changed us." He glanced around the room, not as a performer now, not as a defendant, but as someone who belonged. What we become next depends on what we choose now, whether we reach forward or pull away. The council murmured again, but not with uncertainty. With conversation, with dialogue. The barrier was cracking further. One delegate, from a waterbound culture called the Sejanari, rippled her voice across the room. "Then perhaps it is not your fear that troubles us, but our own. We remember our own dark ages. We buried them deep, but your presence reminds us. And that discomfort, that is what we resist." David gave a faint smile. Not smug, just tired, but not alone. It's all right to remember. That's how healing begins. There was a long pause. The chair's lights pulsed slowly. Then, this chamber is not built for certainty. It is built for questions. And today, Ambassador Wren, you have asked better questions than we expected. Another beat of silence passed. Then VsAliens turned toward the circle of delegates. Their voice shifted, becoming formal. Ritualistic. "Let us vote, not on membership, but on recognition. Not of technology, not of treaties, but of being. Let the council decide not who humanity is, but whether we will choose to see them." And the lights dimmed. One by one, species cast their pulses of agreement or abstention, ritual flashes of thought, of feeling, projected into a shared neural field. David could not read them, but he didn't need to, because by then, something else had changed. He no longer stood in the room trying to prove humanity deserved a place. He stood among peers. The final pulse came. The chamber brightened. The chair turned. Humanity is recognized, not as perfect, not as peaceful, but as present and as part. David felt his chest rise, and this time it wasn't rage. It wasn't defiance. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time. Relief and pride. He inclined his head, not a bow, but a nod, equal to equal. As the council adjourned, delegates filed out in slow, deliberate movement. Some still cautious, some thoughtful. A few offered him their equivalent of a nod, or a bow, or a flicker of light. And then, one unexpected moment. The Cryan ambassador, rigid and cold since the beginning, paused beside him. "You burn bright," it said simply. David turned, meeting its gaze. "We always have. You just didn't see the fire. And now you do." The Cryan nodded once and walked away. David stood alone again, but it didn't feel like isolation. It felt like the end of something and the beginning of something else. Outside the chamber, on the edge of the orbital station, Earth hung in the distance. A pale blue marble, fragile and ferocious, scarred and shining. David watched it for a long time, arms folded. A voice behind him, familiar, Human. You think they'll actually trust us now? David didn't turn. No, not yet. But they're listening. That's the start of everything. The aide stepped beside him. That speech wasn't what we wrote. David smiled faintly. Wasn't for them. Not entirely. Then who? His eyes stayed fixed on Earth.